Rostyslav Khotin, Senior Editor, RFE RL's Ukrainian Service. Good morning, sir. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Especially because we have such, I would say, good news to discuss. At the very beginning, I wanted to take a look at some of the reactions, both from Volodymyr Zelensky as well as from Moldovan leadership. So let's give it a listen. Or not. I mean, I was hoping that we'll be able to see them. But in any case, let me quickly recap then what we're supposed to see. Volodymyr Zelensky took to X, where he said that this is a historic step for Ukraine. Meanwhile, a Moldovan foreign minister who was in Poland also expressed the fact that he's very glad that this process has finally begun. However, it is a lengthy process. So let me start by asking you, how is Ukraine preparing and sort of what kind of time frame we're looking at?
Yeah, it's a historical decision by the European Council, announced by Belgian presidency in the European Union, that Ukraine and Moldova both can start negotiations on the 25th of June, on Tuesday. Even the time slots were already named. Ukraine will start at 3:30 p.m., followed by Moldova at 6 p.m. The start of the negotiations for the accession of both Ukraine and Moldova will be happening in Luxembourg on Tuesday, as I said. So it's a historical day. As President Zelensky said, Ukraine is returning to Europe. Historically, Ukraine was artificially cut off from European family of nations, from Europe, by Russian Empire in the Tsarist era, by Soviet Union. Then Russia, when Ukraine became independent, did its utmost to cut Ukrainian ties to the West, to the European family. So it's historical day. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already nominated the Ukrainian negotiating team. It consists of 30 experts, mostly deputy ministers from Minister of Economy, Agriculture, Foreign Ministry, several people, key figures from presidential administration, including the head of presidential office, Andriy Yermak, who is extremely influential politician in Ukraine, political figure in Ukraine. But the delegation will be headed by Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister in charge of European and Euro-Atlantic integration, Olga Stefanishina. So Ukrainian delegation is ready to start. It's important also to notice that Ukraine is going step by step together with Moldova to the European Union. And for Moldova, it's extremely important day because Moldova is supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression. Moldova clearly understands that if Ukraine wins, if Ukraine becomes part of Europe, Moldova can follow together as a pair. Maya Sandu, Moldovan president, already has signed a decree on the start of accession talks yesterday, and Moldova will hold a referendum on EU membership in the autumn this year. It's extremely important development. So Moldovans will vote in the referendum, kind of approving the European integration, accession of Moldova to the European Union already this autumn. Just to make one point clear, that this referendum will coincide with a presidential election in Moldova, and it's still kind of a decisive battle because Moldova has two vectors of development. One is looking westwards, as Maya Sandu is a symbol of this westward move to the European Union, and another one, represented by former President Igor Dodon, is looking eastward towards Russia. So it's Moldova, it's kind of still situation is kind of shaky. So it's important that Moldova will choose a European path of integration. Unfortunately, the member of this trio, Georgia, they kind of slipping because They recently, their parliament adopted this foreign agent law, Russian-style foreign agent law, and Georgia still remains as just a candidate with no prospect of starting accession talks so far. So, unfortunately, in this trio, Ukraine and Moldova are front runners, but Georgia is lagging behind.
Right. Unfortunately, we all saw these protests taking place in Georgia over this foreign agents bill. And of course, we can see the EU expanding its sphere of influence and sort of Russia trying to do the same with countries such as Georgia or Serbia and so on. But I wanted to ask you about some of the challenges that could occur on the way of Ukraine's and Moldova's joining the EU, namely, for instance, issues such as Transnistria in Moldova. Would that be a problem? And what about territories annexed by Russia at the moment in Ukraine? What if, and I think, you know, it is the worst case scenario, what if Ukraine won't manage to get them back? Would that be a hindrance on their path towards the EU?
Of course, for both Ukraine and Moldova, it's better to join the European Union as fully reintegrated territorially, as countries with fully reintegrated territories, which are now currently in Ukraine under Russian occupation, or in Moldova under this proxy pro-Moscow separatist regime in Transnistria. Ukraine does believe that it can solve the territorial problem either by political means, hence this peace formula and global peace summit recently in Switzerland, or by military means. Ukraine still hopes that with the Western military help, it can beat Russia on the battlefield. For Moldova, it's also a difficult choice, because Transnistrian problem is 32 years old. The whole thing started back in 1992 after the country got independence from the Soviet Union, and still it's kind of run by kind of mafia style, I would say, honestly, to be honest with you, regime of cronies, pro-Russian cronies in Transnistria, in Tiraspol. Moldova really thinks that if Ukraine wins the war, if Ukraine wins defeats Russian aggression, Moldova also could benefit from this by reintegrating its territories, and to join, both countries could join kind of in the borders of 1991 borders, which are internationally recognized. So it's a difficult task for both countries, difficult challenge, because Moscow still, thinks in imperial terms, thinking of Ukraine as kind of not fully fledged country, occupying 20% of Ukrainian territory. Moscow, despite not having a common border with Moldova, but still supports this kind of separatist regime in Tiraspol, and keeping even some troops, just several hundred of troops, so-called peacekeepers, who are actually occupiers on the left bank of Dniester River in Moldova. So it's an enormous task, enormous pressure on both countries to resolve these territorial issues before integrating. Speaking of terms, we don't know when it can happen. We don't know. But what we know that psychologically, and not only psychologically, but they were stated by Charles Michel, the head of European Council, last year, that both countries could join the European Union in 2030. For Ukraine, it's also a challenge
let me ask
Hungarian challenge, for instance. Hungary will be.
I actually wanted to ask you about Hungary. Exactly, I wanted to ask you about Hungary. So let me do this now. They're taking the presidency of the Council in July. So some are saying this is why these talks are starting next week and not at a later date. However, some skeptics are saying that, nothing much will be established because, of course, Hungary will stand in the way of progress of these negotiations. So what is your take on that? And can the rest of the EU do something to sway them? I mean, we just saw that in case of NATO, right? When Mark Rutte managed to convince Viktor Orban to actually get on board with his candidacy So do you think that, what can be done to get Hungary on board, and will they manage to do that?
Hungary is a special case, but it's a pragmatic case. Viktor Orban is pragmatist. Of course, it's important for Ukraine politically to start accession talks now under Belgian presidency at the end of June next week. It's important, extremely important, taking into account that Hungary will be presiding in the European Union in the second half of this year. But for Hungarian 6 months presidency, for Ukraine, main task is just to survive, start quietly accession talks. Ukraine doesn't hope for, big progress on the Hungarian presidency. But then in the first half of 2025, Poland will be president of the European Council. So Ukraine hopes to kind of do it, to receive a boost in its European integration under Polish presidency, then followed by Lithuania in 2027. But with Ukrainian case and Moldovan case, it's not just the friendly countries which strongly support Ukrainian European integration, like Poland or like Baltic countries. Ukraine has support from many countries: Germany, France, Italy. It doesn't really matter. All countries support Ukraine except for Hungarians, but Hungarians are pragmatic. Orban, if there is a consensus and Orban remains isolated, he has a tendency to switch off sides and at least become a neutral case, kind of. He won't veto Ukrainian European integration because he understands that despite his pro-Russian rhetoric, Orban doesn't want to have common border with Russia. That's the main point. He understands, despite he makes some kind of, he leans sometimes towards Russia. He understands that Russia is a danger for Hungarian national security, and he doesn't want to have a Hungarian-Russian border like it was in the Soviet Union when there was a Hungarian-Soviet border. He wants to have a Ukraine as a buffer state between Hungary and Moscow.
Right, so let's wait and see what happens on the 25th on Tuesday. Till then, thank you so much, sir. Rostyslav Khotin was our guest this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.